Welcome back to Diverse Thinking, Different Learning, a Child Nexus podcast. I'm so excited that you are joining me today. In today's episode, we are delving into the crucial topic of supporting Black children with learning differences in the education system. My guest, Jason B. Allen, is the National Director of Partnerships for the National Parents Union, and he brings a wealth of experience and insight to the conversation. With over 19 years of experience in education as a teacher, administrator, and leader, Jason has dedicated his life to amplifying parent voices and advocating for marginalized communities. Please join me in welcoming Jason B. Allen to the podcast.
Millions of kids struggle with learning, processing, and social emotional difficulties. These challenges interfere with their ability to reach their full potential. Dr. Karen Wilson is here to help. Her extensive background in pediatric neuropsychology and higher education have prepared her for this unique mission. Listen as she delivers content to inform, educate, and empower parents and educators. This will enable you to identify challenges that kids face and get them on the road to achieving their full potential. This is Diverse Thinking, Different Learning by Child Nexus.
Jason, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. It is an honor to be here with you on the podcast.
It is so great to see you again. I was just saying before we began recording that we've seen each other twice in the last week, and this is like the first time we've ever met in the span of a week. So it's really exciting to be able to talk to you in person.
Yes, super excited. And I'm really honored again to be here on this platform, Diverse Thinking, and sharing information with people who are listening and who will connect to the conversation.
Absolutely. I've been, like I said, all week, I've been waiting for this conversation, looking forward to it. I learned about you when you were on Debbie Reber's podcast. And then I read a blog that you wrote back in 2021.
Awesome.
And yes. And in that blog, you vividly describe Raquan, a Black boy in middle school for the first time, who's immediately grouped, separated, and singled out as a perceived problem and a threat to the learning environment. And you wrote that Black boys would much rather risk becoming a statistic than being viewed as a special education kid. And in that piece, you highlighted a number of things, but you also, one of the things is you highlighted the stigma associated with learning disabilities. And it's not just students who are struggling who are stigmatized. Students in gifted programs, Black kids in gifted programs are stigmatized as well.
Yes, very true. Being dual exceptional, I can tell you that it's no easy task being a student who learns differently, which I personally believe we all learn differently. So I know the scrutiny that students go through, having been a 19-year educator, but also my personal experience. I remember coming through school and how, even growing up near or around the hood, that it was always a factor that you were teased if you were on the short bus, and you were teased if you were in gifted and talented classes because you were either a nerd or you were either, the kid that rode on the short bus. And so there's a dynamic that's happening there. The uniqueness and difference in being a bookworm and a nerd, which is awesome, because I love telling my students I'm a nerd. I love to read. I have hundreds of books. As you see pictures all around my walls, I also have books, documentaries, magazines, other artifacts that are around me just because that's my personality. And I think that one of the things that I strive to do as a lifelong teacher is to help others see the ways in which we learn differently and making this a norm as opposed to making children who do learn differently and need different support to feel ostracized and isolated.
Right. And it really presents a unique challenge for parents raising Black children with learning differences.
Yes.
Because of the stigma of being a Black child, being a Black boy specifically, and then also having a learning difference. And sometimes it's difficult for educators to figure out what's contributing to the behaviors that they're seeing. And that misunderstanding creates additional problems because kids don't get identified for the struggles they're really having and then don't get the support that they need.
Very true. And I'll add to that and say that, being a part of Black culture and in the Black community, we all take this on differently. People will say, well, some households don't acknowledge that, my child has autism, or my child has ADHD, or my child has a speech impediment. Well, just because we don't acknowledge it doesn't mean that it's not there. We think about racism. Just because we don't acknowledge that racism is embedded in the systems that operate this country doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. And I'm sharing this to say that with families, Black families in particular, we have to share our stories and open our mouths. Too often we're silenced about, okay, I have a learning difference, I have a learning disability, but what are the solutions around helping me to navigate through everyday life? And I don't think that in our community, especially, Black children or Black parents get the resources to adequately navigate in this space.
Absolutely. And when your kid is struggling, you're already feeling overwhelmed. You're already feeling uncertain about what this means for them, uncertain about their future. And I know you have a great deal of experience as an educator, as a special education educator. Are there things that you have seen and that you know from your experience are helpful for parents, for caregivers, because oftentimes caregivers are grandparents, aunts, uncles, things that they can do to ensure that their kids can thrive academically and socially as well?
I love that. So I'm going to go in this angle with that question because I really want school leaders, educators, policymakers to hear this and see, hey, this is a solution. Why is my school not implementing this? I want to give a major shout out to Mr. Aaron Fernandez. He is my former principal from way back in the day, early 2000s. And, he trained us around family and community engagement, which is why I'm a major advocate for the work now. When I think about professional development and the things that he did, we had parents at the table with us during pre-planning at the beginning of the school year. Why am I highlighting this? Why is this important? We were able to talk with families. We were in community. So I was able to see, here are all of the notes that teachers previously have added, but here's what this looks like in real life. This is me visiting with the family and seeing that, this child is also living with grandparents, for example, and the grandfather has dyslexia and the grandmother never finished school because she went to work to help with taking care of the family. So there are some education gaps there. And also there are some things that are naturally happening where we're doing what we can with what we know. And so what we were able to do is to work with parents and families before school started on, here are some social, here are some academic, here are some developmental challenges that we have uncovered with doing something that, quite frankly, a lot of school leaders and policymakers in education are not doing, and that is building relationships and spending time with the people who we're serving. Now, what does this do to impact the things that we're talking about now in regards to learning differences in Black children? Well, if I am connected to these families and I know that there are challenges in the home, now as a teacher, I'm able to say, hey, here is homework, for example, but here's a learning plan that I'm sending home. So here's what you can do as a parent, as a caretaker, with the resources and the knowledge that you have to connect with the skill set that we're trying to continue that learning process at home. But what we will hear is teachers are overwhelmed, that school leaders have so much paperwork. And I get it because I've been there. I've been a school leader. I've been a district administrator. I've been a teacher, a parent. I've been around the gamut, right? But in all of those situations, I knew that it took dedicated educators to say, here are the issues, and now here are solutions that we're bringing to the table outside of the box. And that did not cost us money. It may have cost us time, but it did not cost us money. So I'm sharing that again to say that if we really are intentional about the success of our students, we will make a way or find a way, period.
Absolutely. And I love that because then families are partners, right?
Partners.
You're actually
Yes.
forming a real partnership with educators and families when you do that, when you seat them at the table. At the beginning of the school year, in the middle of the school year, end of the school year. And it's really interesting because as I'm hearing you talking, I'm thinking about employers who do, have feedback, about how things are going, right? They evaluate their employees. You get feedback from businesses asking, how did we do? And it would be wonderful, I think, to send that out to families. How did we do this academic year? How was our communication? How effectively were we supporting your child? What can we do better? I don't think I've ever received a form like that from any school that my children have attended.
Well, let me tell you that most school districts and schools do have their end of the year surveys. But then I also think about, where does this information go? Who is informed by this information? So if you're listening now, go back to your school districts and say, hey, principal, do you know, where does this end of the year data go? Do you receive a report on this? And how is this being presented to staff? How is it being presented to other educators so that bus drivers can hear that, hey, if I'm playing soft music in the morning, or if I'm playing feel-good music in the morning, that may help with getting the kids like calm and ready, for school. If I'm a crossing guard, am I making sure that I'm looking at all of the angles where the kids are actually walking to the school to ensure that safe routes to school are in place? Like, how are we really using this data to help us improve the educational experience? Now, I gave those two examples about the crossing guard, right? People are like, well, this doesn't connect to what happens in the classroom with bus drivers. But this is what I'm challenging educators to understand, that it absolutely does. If we are not grounded in family and community engagement standards, then we will continue to believe that the social emotional development of children does not impact the academic outcomes that we see in data that is telling us that A, kids can't read, and B, kids can't add. Well, I don't want to hear anything you have to say if you have disrespected me, if you haven't welcomed me, if you haven't acknowledged me, if you have treated me less than, if you have treated me as a label, if you have made me feel like a stereotype, if you have made me feel inferior to you or made me feel that I am beneath you and that you are here to save me and that I need to be lifted up. And I want to also say this, that we can't get stuck on the notion of the white savior complex, because guess what? There are a lot of black saviors out here too that look at our children less than and think that they are just data points of what you can't do, and we don't look at what they can be. So I'm challenging the way that we also are thinking as Black educators about the very children that we're serving.
Right. And it just speaks to the idea and the need for creating these supportive and empowering learning environments. And the learning environments extend beyond the walls of the school if we are talking about supporting a child's learning journey.
Yes. Learning does not start or end at school. Learning is ongoing. It is happening everywhere at all times with everyone. So even if you're 99, you are still learning, growing, and developing. But the way that we look at education, we think that it's central to K through 12. I think a lot of times people forget that there's higher education, there's, continual ways that you can learn and grow. We hear professional development, and I think that we also forget that even on your job, even in workforce development, you're still growing, learning, developing. And so I think that just having a different perspective of education and really seeing the true power and value in what education offers is a starting point that we all need to kind of reconnect to and start together.
Absolutely. And, when you talk about the school bus driver and the crossing guard, these are all individuals our children encounter on their way to school. And even the person who greets them at the school, right? And we know the research on how much a sense of belonging and mattering contributes to self-concept, academic success. Are there strategies that you found to be effective in fostering that sense of belonging, mattering, among Black youth, BIPOC youth, especially those who face challenges due to learning differences?
So you've heard me mention this, the family and community engagement standards. These were adopted by the National PTA. Dr. Karen Mapp does a phenomenal job in her course series at Harvard on training educators and leaders around this work. So I definitely want to share that as a resource for people to get started. Now, to answer the question specifically, I would say changing school culture. Again, going back to the example that I just gave, when Black students enter a school, it is about what they see. So look at my background. Do they see notable Black, brown, multiracial people who have done amazing things and attributed to our society? Is that present in not just what we see on the walls? Because we have some phenomenal schools doing murals and portraits, and that's great. But now the next step is making sure that what our children see on the walls is also presented in the curriculum. Okay? So step one is, what do the children see when they come into the building in regards to the murals, the photos, even your staff members, right? But then the next step is this present in the materials that we're actually teaching our students and children, but is it also present in the materials that we're sharing with families to continue learning at home? So I think that when we think about creating a welcoming environment, it's what our children are seeing around them and also what is being presented to our children and what they see and are able to take away with them for additional learning when they go home.
Right. And it seems like that's when we can kind of lean into our history of storytelling to raise awareness, to challenge stereotypes, to promote, understanding of the Black experience and also experience of young people with learning differences. To see themselves in those books, in those stories is very powerful.
I also want to present a different perspective as well. I recently presented at Morehouse School of Medicine to researchers from all over the nation and even some globally. A lot of practitioners, a lot of professors and deans in higher education, and of course, policymakers. And coming from the family engagement, parent voice lens, I was giving them insight to making the data real. A lot of times we see data and it reflects Black people in a negative way. We are lower income. We are marginalized in several different ways. We have lower academic test scores. And so I'm sharing this as a reminder to people that, again, when we go in and we lead with this data, because you hear often, we're leading with the data. So if we're leading with the data and this is what the data says, then how is this conveyed to our consumers? So let's take the, academics out of the equation of education and let's look at the business aspect. Customer service wise, if you are constantly approaching me and treating me and telling me that I'm less than and I need help, I'm bringing this analogy back. How does that help me build a strong relationship with you? And so again, we have to reimagine how we are engaging our consumer base, right? So teachers who get frustrated with the job, for example, and go on social media and talk about how bad the children are, how ignorant the children are, how horrible the parents are because we can't get them to do what we want them to do, which is what the school is telling them that parents should be doing, as opposed to looking at what parents are actually doing and how we can actually meet parents where they are. And so now when we think about that, it goes back to the analogy of having a welcoming environment. Don't make this just look pretty and look good. When you're inclusive, that means that the school isn't welcoming the community in, the community is the school. It changes the mindset of, we're not opening the school doors because we want to welcome parents and community in. Parents and community are already the school. We're already a part of it. And so now it's about not looking at what we're doing with representation and what we visually see, but how are we being intentional about making sure that you are present and you know that you belong here. That's a total different, it's a different aspect of what we're doing.
Right, right. And for educators who might be listening and thinking, I really want to create a more inclusive classroom. What can I do to ensure that my classroom is inclusive, is representative, that I'm meeting the diverse needs of the students I'm serving?
Yes, that's a very good question. Educators, again, have the power. A lot of educators are facing severe policy changes that restrict them from bringing in different books, that prevent them from being able to address certain things. But education is power. So if you tell me that I can't teach this particular lesson, you're telling me as a teacher what I can't present in the classroom. But if I understand that learning doesn't end or stop here, then as a teacher, if I'm connected to community, then who in the community is already has a functioning nonprofit that can elevate some of these life skills, cultural skills, things that are being banned in the actual classroom or school, to make sure that the children are getting what they need in enrichment programs, after school programs, early learning centers where children are having to matriculate through, even daycares that are, providing services with kids. I always say this to educators is, how are we connecting again with community? So if you're not connected to these entities, two things. One, are you really connected to the families and children that you're serving? And two, have you exhausted all means to make sure that your children are successful? And so I would say community engagement is key. Educators, get connected to the very people in community, because we are present. There are people in community who have been and will always be doing the work.
And that's where the partnerships come in, right?
There you go.
It's the educational systems partnering with families and partnering with community agencies. Because again, we're talking about the fact that the learning environment extends beyond the walls of the school into the community, into the families' homes, because learning continues at home. And so when you have family engagement, when educators are communicating with families about what their kids need and providing them with the tools that they need to support their kids at home, then you have a real partnership with families.
Yes. No, I mean, it could all be so simple. I have to just, coin the phrase from Lauryn Hill. It could all be so simple. But I also know the realities that when you're in schools and you have school leaders that don't invest or believe in family and community engagement, they create additional barriers. So now I have to be strong enough to go through those additional barriers from the school leadership. But then you also have other educators who don't understand, who don't connect to family engagement. So now I have to fight colleagues who don't believe in what I'm trying to do to ensure that the whole child is being developed and their needs are being met. So then you add in student behaviors that are normal and natural and all of the other, challenges that educators face in the school building and school districts. And so, yes, it can be very challenging to get this done, but it's not impossible. And so I'm sharing this with educators again. Make sure that you are connecting with community. I say this to parents. I say this to fellow teachers. Teachers and parents have to be best friends in this work. And your principals, your school district leaders are not going to say that, because they also know that you have a contract. So I want Black educators to also know ins and outs of, I have a contract. There's certain things that I cannot do. However, I am also a human being. I am also a citizen here, and I also am in community. So as an educator, as a teacher, how am I leveraging parents to say, hey, teachers want to do a better job, but they're working 4 or 5 other jobs. So if we pay teachers more so they can actually focus more on what they're doing in-house, then maybe we would see some changes in results of how children learn. But at the end of the day, we don't equate that to academics and learning, because people look at it as, oh, this is just giving more money to teachers. But when we make those statements, it's also showing that we have not understood the power in education and teaching, because when our teachers are not well, financially, spiritually, physically, mentally, then we have to be very realistic about how impactful are they actually being on the well-being of our children. So parents, educators, I caution us to think about that, especially in an election year. I caution us to think about education in that way. If teachers and educators are struggling to survive, most of our teachers that are, for example, let me use Atlanta. If $55,000 is the median income, and if you make less than this, you are considered the working poor, and you're in poverty, that's bus drivers. That's parent coordinators. That's your front office clerk. That is your cafeteria staff members. That is all of your paraprofessionals. That is all of the assistant staff that support educators and teachers with meeting the needs of every student. But most importantly, it is a lot of your novice and early teachers.
Right.
So if these people who are working with our children are also the working poor, well, we know the impacts of trauma and poverty in the everyday American citizen's life. And so the school district is not exempt from this. So we have to understand the connection to community engagement, because if parents and teachers are best friends and they're connected, they're collaborating, then parents are now advocating for what teachers are saying they need. We need more resources around advancement in technology. We need more resources for the digital learning device so that what we're doing translates in the home. So now parents are at city council meetings saying that, hey, we need internet everywhere so that when our children are leaving from school, they can still learn in the after school programs and the enrichment programs, et cetera, so forth. But when educators and parents are not connected and are able to share these conversations for resources and ways to build solutions, then we will continue to see data that reflects that our children cannot read and they cannot add.
Right. I mean, you've said so many things right there, Jason. I feel like doing the snapping right now because, and I think one of the things that you said, like I said, you said so many things that we don't talk about enough, is that we can't ask educators to do more if they don't have the resources that they need in order to do the thing we're asking them to do. Right. And that's what you're saying when you talk about, them not being paid enough, not having the resources that they need to support diverse learners. If they're not giving the support they need to create that inclusive classroom, and it's financial support, and then also that emotional, structural support that they need as well to do that. And so there's so many conversations on so many levels that we need to have in order to support young people. There's, at the family level, the community level, the educational level, the policy level. And for many families, for many educators, it can seem very overwhelming in terms of all the things that need to be done in order to ensure that our kids have a future, and to ensure that they can achieve their full potential, all that we know that they're capable of achieving, in spite of challenges that are in their way, whether that be mental health issues, learning differences, or even environmental difficulties.
Yes, I'm glad that you brought up environmental justice as an area that the National Parents Union is organizing parents to, again, lift their voices. We don't think about things such as, access to clean water and the infrastructure of our buildings that impact students' learning, their development. We're in partnership with several health entities and even hospital education outreach departments. And so how are we training them on family and community engagement standards? How are they reaching, Black parents and families specifically? In Atlanta, there was a big uproar about Dr. Jackie's comments around Black women not feeling pain and being, over-exaggerating that in a sense. And we heard from a lot of our partners that were like, here is why we're educating people on how to engage families and different cultures, because we know that Black women are not listened to in these different situations. So we think about the number of single mothers, right, that are represented in our organization and who are fighting against health and wellness injustices that are happening. but also the environmental impacts of this and partnerships that we have with earthday.org. We're working on some phenomenal campaigns. Earth Day is coming up. I have to do the shameless plug because a lot of people don't equate Black people to environmental justice. But I have sisters, I have a mother, I have grandparents, I have, aunts, I have women who I love dearly that are connected to me. And seeing the data about Black women and fibroids is alarming. But also learning that plastic plays a major role in fibroids. I was sharing this with my mom, and she was like, well, I don't understand how that could. Well, the toxins, the pesticides that come from plastics, think about Black women and their role in cooking. Where do we house a lot of plastics? Hello, Black educators, I'm dropping some knowledge on you all to take back to your schools and then get connected to doing a community cleanup day with Earth Day. Right. A lot of the plastics that are housed in cafeterias, kitchens, where a lot of our women are, it is impacting their health in ways that we're not realizing this. So when we think about partnerships, and I've heard you say that a lot of times throughout this conversation, one of the reasons probably why NPU hired me to be the National Director of Partnerships is because we have to be able to help parents and educators connect the dots to partners that are helping with what we're doing. Education, again, does not start or stop in school. And so now, how are we partnering with hospitals? We're not thinking about that, but don't children have to go to the doctors and have wellness checks, and they have to have their shots and things done? So healthcare plays a major role in what happens in schools. Transportation plays a major role in what happens in our schools. Workforce development plays a major role in what happens in our schools, but also environmental justice and how access to clean water, food deserts. So all of the things that we think about Title I, disadvantaged communities, disenfranchised communities, these are all things that impact how children and parents are not just living, but a lot of times surviving through these things.
Right. And that's where, making sure that parents are equipped with information, because oftentimes they don't have the information that they need in order to make good decisions for their kids, and equipping them with information that can help them navigate these educational systems, to navigate issues that are going on in their communities. That is important. And it sounds like through the family engagement work you do, you can start there. And
yes,
then
it is a start.
Yes, absolutely.
And we help parents to advocate for, we have to be realistic. Every school doesn't have a parent liaison or a parent center. That's where information is housed. Now, a lot of schools will say, well, we do have this, but it's Title I and everything has to be academic. But let me help you guys out. It does have to be academic. And literacy is academic. But let me also break down literacy for you. We have digital literacy. We have media literacy. We have cultural literacy. We have health literacy that connects to social emotional learning. It connects to health advocacy and what parents and children need to know for advocating for their intellectual and emotional needs. That connects to IEPs and special education. So again, where there is a will, there is a way, and we have to be intentional about making sure that we're connecting parents and families to information that we're able to house in the school, but then again, having those intentional community partnerships so that what we cannot house or provide through the school, we can make sure that there is a clear lane of communication that we can ensure that our parents are getting to the county, city, regional resources that they need for housing development, for transportation, et cetera, so forth.
Right. And I think about even navigating the IEP and the 504 plan process. Many parents don't know where to begin, what they're entitled to, what their child's rights are, how to go through that process. And also they don't have the self-advocacy skills to say, your assessment showed that my kid doesn't need support, but I think that they do. What do I do next? And so again, having the resources, the tools, the support they need in order to advocate for their kids is such an important piece, because it can change it can change. And I've seen it change the trajectory of a child's life when they get the support they need to thrive.
Yes. You're exactly right. I think, again, intentionality about what we're doing and how we're doing it, also respecting differences. I do want to acknowledge that culturally, even in the Black community, I love God, but I also realize that everyone is not Christian. And I have to say this because a lot of times we bring in our beliefs to the work that we do. And so how are we now ensuring that children of color who are Jewish, who are Muslim, who are Hindu, who are spiritualists, who may be from other countries and have different cultural beliefs or even cultural ways of showing their beliefs, how are we making sure that they are also being served well, that the policies that we are putting forward that a lot of times embed the American Christian nationalist ideals, do these things really fit cultural beliefs of others who we are serving? Because Black people are not a monolith, right? So we are not all the same. We do not all believe the same, show up the same, have the same experiences. And so I want to also highlight that a lot of times as we become educated, the Black elite also can become the oppressors of our people. And we have to take a different approach. And again, not becoming those saviors of children and families to say, oh, well, you're less than and you don't know. So let me come in and tell you, let me come in and help you. Let me come in and, kind of direct you like you are a lost sheep to what you need to be doing. When in fact, maybe let me talk to you in a different way so that I can make sure that we're both on the same page. Because again, sometimes people know, and it's a fear factor. I may not be prepared to handle my child's learning disabilities, for example, but that doesn't mean that I'm not a good parent, that I'm not being compassionate, that I'm not showing up, that I'm not comforting this child when they feel isolated, alone, and they feel broken. And so, I want to encourage educators, especially Black educators, to look at it from a lens of empathy, but also compassion, and ensuring that we do not become the oppressors and gatekeepers of how these families can connect to better educational outcomes so that we can see true freedom amongst our people.
Absolutely. I mean, Jason, your personal journey from experiencing special education services yourselves to becoming a special education teacher, educator, advocate is absolutely inspiring. And it's clear that your own experiences in these various roles have influenced your approach to supporting Black boys, Black children in special education, both as an educator and as an advocate. And, for parents and educators who are listening, who are saying, I'm on fire right now with everything that you're saying, where can I start? If I say, I want to have a partnership with my kid's school, or I'm an educator, I want to have more family engagement. Is there a place that you can direct them to get started? Is there something that they can do now without feeling overwhelmed with all of the things that need to be done?
That's awesome. So I can do this very quickly. The nationalparentsunion.org is free to join us. I'm making partnerships with individual members who are parents, with parent organizations, with corporations, with hospitals, with Google Education Department, anyone that you can think about who has an impact on children and families in regards to education. So you can definitely go to our website. We have free trainings. We have toolkits that are available. These things are resources to help you navigate your local work. Now, locally, I will have to tell you, look for your PTA or maybe your parent group that is advocating for families. You may say, I don't have that. Then guess what? You can be that one parent that starts that, and NPU is a resource to help you get started. I'm doing this right now with a parent in New Mexico. So yes, we can help you get started with building that group. I also would say, look for other advocates that are focusing in on education equity, housing justice, environmental justice, because there's synergy with people that are advocating for civil and human rights. And so a lot of times they may not even be able to connect the dots because no one has approached them. So that also can be a resource for you as well. And then a last area I would say is connect to long-standing organizations like the Urban League, the NAACP, the teacher organizations or the teacher unions, because again, they all are playing a role in advocating for what's happening in our schools and what's happening in education. So those are just a couple of things that I would throw out for free for people to utilize, that are free, tangible resources that they can put their hands on, they can ask about or get connected to, that will help them in their journey.
Wonderful. And I'm going to make sure to put links to that information in the show notes so people can connect.
Awesome.
Jason, I love the work that you're doing. I'm so glad that we have connected. I'm looking forward to collaborating with you this year and beyond. Thank you so much for all the work that you're doing. If people want to connect with you directly with your work, is there a website, a place where we can send them to connect with you?
Oh, yes. You can connect. So nationalparentsunion.org. My email address is Jason, JASON @npunion.org. So if you're looking to partner with us, connect with us, please get to our website, but also email me if you have any questions. Outside of my work with NPU, I am the executive director of my family's foundation, which is Lily's Foundation for Change. We are centering SEL and working with grandparents and caretakers. There's not a lot of us in this space. So liliesfoundation.org is, again, it's a free resource for people to go to our blog, get resources, check out why should we definitely be advocating for grandparents and caretakers. It's super important. And then I also will leave my personal email address just in case there are teachers that want to pick my brain or like other things that I'm doing through educational entities, which is my small business. My email address is professorjba@gmail.com. I'm smiling every time I say Professor JBA because that nickname came from my students. My phone is right here. Hello, Professor JBA. This name tag is about 15 years old. But it came from an activity that I did with my students in special education around knowing your superpower. And when I shared with them the reason why I do this work, and, one of my favorite comics is the X-Men. And so instead of Professor Xavier, they named me Professor JBA. And I thought that was super cool from that lesson. But it also speaks to our intentionality of seeing all students, hearing all students, and making sure that everyone is valued in our community. So those would be my last words that I would leave for everyone is be intentional about making sure that you're reaching and teaching all.
Professor JBA, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much. This was an honor.
Thank you so much for tuning in to Diverse Thinking, Different Learning. We believe in the power of understanding and support for all children, especially those navigating neurodiversity. If you found today's episode insightful and you're seeking more tools to support your child with ADHD, dyslexia, or anxiety, we encourage you to explore our on-demand courses. They are designed by experts and tailored to meet the unique needs of neurodiverse learners. These courses offer valuable insights, practical strategies, and empowering guidance for parents. Visit our website, childnexus.com, and click on mini courses to learn more. Thank you again for listening, and remember to check out all the resources discussed today in the show notes. I'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to Diverse Thinking, Different Learning by Child Nexus. For more resources, visit us online at childnexus.com.